Joining me now is MS Now's Ken Dilanian and law professor at Southwestern Law School, former JAG officer Rachel Van Landingham. Thank you both for being here. Ken, I understand you have brand new reporting about the investigation into this video. What are you learning?
Chris, we've learned via a person familiar with the matter that the FBI has reached out to schedule interviews with the 6 senators. They've done that through the Capitol Police, and that doesn't mean there's an FBI investigation underway, but it is a remarkable development considering what they actually said and whether there's any evidence of a crime. Most people think there is not, but nonetheless, the FBI is reaching out to schedule these interviews. Of course, one of the issues here would be the speech and debate clause. Members of Congress are protected from prosecution for things they say and do connected to their legislative duties, not just things they say on the House or Senate floor, but things connected to their legislative duties. No doubt they would argue that this statement falls under that bailiwick. But again, we're a long way from that. But it is interesting and newsworthy that the FBI is reaching out to schedule interviews with these senators, Chris.
Thank you so much for that. So, Rachel, obviously that is separate and apart from what I want to talk to you about, because that involves all 6. Let's talk about what's facing Mark Kelly. When they say they're launching a review in military terms, what are they reviewing and what does an investigation actually look like?
Thank you. So it would look like just going through the video and determining whether or not any of this, what I believe is absolutely First Amendment protected free speech, would fall underneath any of the articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is the military's military penal code, and to see if it rises to the level of one of the military crimes that does restrict service member speech to a greater degree. It's really crazy here, though, and unusual, because the UCMJ actually does still apply to retirees like myself, like to Senator Kelly, but to abuse it in such a way to try to threaten a sitting senator to be court-martialed under one of the UCMJ provisions is just extraordinary.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're clear because, Rachel, the president said this was evidence of seditious behavior, but sedition is not mentioned in the tweet from the Pentagon. It only says that military retirees are subject to federal laws, and I'm quoting here, that prohibit actions intended to interfere with the loyalty, morale, or good order and discipline of the armed forces. So do we know what law or what regulation they're saying he broke?
Sure. I think they're referring to an old 1948 Cold War era statute, 18 U.S.C. 2387, which I believe is grossly unconstitutional following the 1969 Brandenburg case from the United States Supreme Court. But it attempts to criminalize, words or actions that if they have the intent to interfere with the loyalty of those in the service, to get them to basically disobey orders. But again, the actual video said you have to obey lawful orders. You don't have to obey unlawful orders. So even under the actual terms of that statute, the senator's conduct does not meet its terms.
In that video, Democratic lawmakers told U.S. forces who may be asked to carry out an illegal order, quote, "We have your back," but provided no details about how. In this environment and in this Department of War, as they call it, what is a member of the military facing should they refuse to follow an order they believe to be illegal? And if the military goes after them for it, is there anything Congress can do about it?
Oh, well, Congress needs to actually legislate and pass those resolutions that call for the president to not bomb, engage in murder campaign against drug cartel members on the high seas. But the military members themselves are in a predicament. They have a legal duty to follow all lawful orders, and that includes all those that come from an appropriate authority and relate to a military duty. There's a legal presumption that all orders are lawful because the lifeblood of the military is obedience to orders. A military member can disobey an order. However, they do so at their own peril, the peril of being court-martialed for the crime of disobedience. It's a military unique crime. However, military members also have a legal duty to disobey unlawful orders, but those unlawful orders fall into the category either they already know it's unlawful And with the military strikes out in the Caribbean, you've got an Office of Legal Counsel memo saying they're lawful, right? So a military member either needs to know it's unlawful or that should know that the order falls into a patently, manifestly illegality, that is ordering a crime such as go shoot those civilians who are peacefully protesting in Chicago, or bomb this migrant boat that's in the middle of the Caribbean with all civilians in it that are just fleeing their country, right? Those would fall into the small category of crimes that a military member absolutely has a legal duty to disobey, or they're guilty of the actual crime they're committing. They'd be guilty of murder. And so the senator's video, failed to provide a more nuance that our military members are really in a catch-22 when it deals with orders they may feel are unlawful, but they don't know are unlawful, and their own chain of command are saying is unlawful. It provides this patina of legality, and it puts them in a precarious position. The illegality of an order will be a complete defense to them, but the punishment is the process. They would have to face being court-martialed potentially for disobedience, or face adverse administrative action that bypasses the court-martial process and tries to administratively separate them. And so our military members, unless they already know an order is unlawful, ordering a specific crime like shooting at civilians or shooting a detainee in their custody, they disobey at their peril.